Man, I am very late to this trend, aren't I? In preparation for the very important presidential election that is going to be coming up soon. No, not that one. I'm talking about the other one. Unfortunately, this is not going to be my continuation of the Mr. Beat ripoff series that I did. This is instead going to be me simply giving a refresher of the Mexican political landscape for those who might not know. I find Mexican political culture to be very interesting as, much like the nation itself, it is really close to what many in the Western world have, but has a lot of differences that sets it apart and makes it unique. Let's compare it to my patria, the USA. It has a president, it has a two-chamber legislature, it has a Supreme Court, and a federalist type of governance. However, unlike the United States, there is no electoral college, they have some element of proportional representation, presidents and governors are limited to a one-term limit, and the United States has 2 viable political parties, while Mexico has 7. However, despite the fact that Mexico has 7 political parties, there are still rather similar lines in how the parties are and how the Mexican political landscape is comparatively to the United States. One of the biggest elements seems to be most of politics is essentially defined as, are you for or against the guy in charge, to the point where one of the parties literally based their entire identity on that aspect, which we'll get to in a bit. But this also gets a little bit complicated because the divides between the parties are not necessarily partisan or ideological as they are in most Western nations. It can be based on a multitude of factors, which we'll again get into in a bit. I guess I should avoid dilly-dallying and just actually get into the political parties in Mexico. The first party we'll discuss is the Institutional Revolutionary Party, or Partido Revolucionario Institucional, or the PRI. Founded in the year 1929 by Mexican President Plutarco Elias Calles. Calles was the leader of a liberal faction in the Mexican Revolution and was elected under the Social Democratic Laborist Party to succeed his fellow general Álvaro Obregón. However, the two were shifting rightward during their tenures and seemingly were heading down a path of authoritarianism and autocracy, which was very odd considering that was literally what was just gotten rid of after the revolution via Porfirio Diaz. Calles, through his harsh persecution of the Catholics during the Cristero War, and Obregón for attempting to break the just instituted one-term precedent. Both of these factors would end up leading to Obregón's assassination before he could take his second term. Calles, seeing all of these issues in the immediate post-war, was afraid of Mexico falling deeper into a civil conflict, so he attempted to break all of the partisan divides by abolishing every single political party in Mexico and reforming them under one party, essentially trying to make it the State Party of Mexico, a title that it would maintain for 72 uninterrupted years. During this time, it had various ideological shifts, starting out as a very authoritarian autocratic party without really any semblance of a political ideology. Then, as a backlash to Calles, their next president, Lázaro Cárdenas, shifted the party vastly to the left. Then, when people inevitably had a backlash against him, the party would shift rightward again, at best being classified as social democratic, but at worst being classified as neoliberal, a shift that they kept maintaining with every succeeding president, to the point where now it is considered the de facto party of the Mexican center. While not explicitly right-wing, they are basically just capitalist neoliberals. Think the Democratic Party's right-wing if it were its own political party. The PRI's longest-standing rival is the National Action Party, or Partido Acción Nacional, or the PAN, a conservative Catholic party formed in opposition to Lázaro Cárdenas's socialistic and atheistic agenda. However, as the PRI started to change, so too did the PAN. Not really policy-wise, but more in rhetoric. They mostly changed their message as the party opposing the PRI and supporting democracy, usually downplaying its more explicit conservative elements, attempting to get people who oppose the PRI to back them, regardless of their political outlook. Such is the case in the 2000 election, where they had managed to get socialists to back them by promising that they would not privatize Mexico's petroleum industry, even though that was one of their primary policies since the party's foundation. By the way, they still supported that policy. They just didn't tell them that they supported that policy, which inevitably led to their candidate ending up winning in the 2000 election. But then came the big problem. When you build your entire party as the opposition party and running on things you oppose rather than what you're for, when you inevitably have to make it known what you stand for and what you're going to do as the mainstream party, you're gonna turn off some people. And turn off people they did, because after electing 2 presidents, people were so turned off from the PAN that in the following election, their candidate ended up getting 3rd, and when one of the former first ladies actively sought the PAN's nomination, they refused to have her as the candidate. Now, if you know anything about Western democracies, you know one thing: when there's a party that represents a broad coalition of the center-right voters, there must also come a broad party that represents center-left voters. Now, what's interesting is that these voters have actually gotten to change the party that represents them. Originally, the party that represented the Mexican left was the Party of the Democratic Revolution, or Partido de la Revolución Democrática, or the PRD. The party was founded by a man by the name of Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, son of Lázaro Cárdenas, who was angry at the rightward shift that his father's party was going in and decided to push for a new left-wing force in Mexico, and he nearly won on his first try, but the controversial results of the 1988 election made it so that it was not meant to be. But he was hoping that the massive blowback after that election and the ensuing administration would propel him straight to the presidential palace. Then came the rise of the left-wing guerrilla movement to the Zapatistas and the assassination of the PRI's presidential candidate, which made people very distrustworthy of leftward candidates. And unfortunately, party struggles started to form, with one faction of the party being extremely loyal to Cuauhtémoc, while many other factions were trying to make it so that they could move past him for upcoming elections. And things got worse as some of the party heads started becoming cozy to the other 2 parties in the mainstream Mexican political discourse, eventually culminating in the PRD signing a bill that would allow the privatization of Pemex, Mexico's state-run petroleum industry, which would culminate in a huge faction of the party to leave and form a new political party. And not that long afterwards, Cuauhtémoc would end up leaving the party as well, which would then turn the party into an empty vacuum, which basically represents the interests of a bunch of really old members of the Mexican left who are nostalgic for Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas, but not too nostalgic to not want to cozy up to the rest of the Mexican political elite. The party that would end up taking its place as the torchbearer of the Mexican left would be the National Regeneration Movement, or Movimiento Regeneración Nacional, or MORENA. This party was founded by 2-time PRD presidential candidate Andrés Manuel López Obrador in 2014 in order to translate a youth-based political movement in Mexico into a new political party, viewing the PRD negatively for voting with the PRI and the PAN to deregulate Pemex. Despite this, MORENA doesn't necessarily stray too far from the PRD ideologically. The party is essentially being made up by the people who were the left wing of the PRD. The biggest difference from MORENA and the PRD is the fact that MORENA is way more open with the idea of being closer to socialists. Due to the fact that AMLO not only has a decent history of radical political activism, combined with the fact that he has aligned himself with many of the pink tide leaders, even ones that a lot of social democrats would consider a little too far. However, despite the fact that of what is considered the mainstream of Mexican politics, they would be considered the most radical, the message seems to be resonating really well, as not only did he win by a large margin in the most recent presidential election, MORENA has also quickly become the new big political force in Mexico, which puts him in the exact same position that the PAN found themselves in before, when the people who run as outsiders become insiders. What happens next? That is yet to be determined. However, despite the fact that most of Mexican political history for a long time has been focused on these 4 political parties, Mexico also has 3 more political parties that while not as prominent as these guys, still hold a very decent amount of power. And to begin this section, we will talk about the Ecologist Green Party of Mexico, or Partido Verde Ecologista de Mexico, or PVEM. As the name implies, this is the Mexican Green Party. However, unlike most green parties around the world that are usually placed on the left side of the political spectrum, PVEM, for a long period of time, has been placed ideologically on the right side of the political spectrum.
Before anyone goes to the comments, I am fully aware if you look up PVEM nowadays the party is described as center-left, but you will see in this section why I do not believe that that political label is genuine for them.
Being considered a green conservative political party. One of the most notable things to show its contrast with other green parties was the fact that in 2008, they were the leading force in Mexico to try and reintroduce the death penalty, which made many international Greens sever their relationship with PVEM. However, if you thought my description of the PRD as an empty vessel was a little bit lax, well, I would have to argue that the PVEM party is way more of an empty vessel than the rest of the parties, with them facing many accusations that they are not really a legitimate party in any sense of the word. For starters, I should mention this. Given the fact that their name has ecologist in it, you would think that the party is very environmentally conscious. Well, in a 2000 interview with the party's leader, Jorge Gonzalez Martinez, he was asked how serious he was about environmentalism, to which he responded with, "To me, ecology is the least important thing to me. I represent interests." Very odd thing for what is allegedly the environmentalist party in Mexico to say, right? I should also mention the fact that the party's leader is the son of the party's founder, which has led to many accusations that the party is just a tight-knit group of friends and family to form a small political cult in the country. But the biggest thing to show how empty of a vessel that PVEM actually is the fact that PVEM, in order to remain politically relevant, has essentially formed a symbiotic relationship with whatever party is in charge at the time. During the early years of the party's existence, the PRI was the party in charge, so they aligned with the PRI. Then when the PAN was in charge, they aligned with the PAN. And now that MORENA is in charge, they are aligned with MORENA. And if I were to hedge my bets, I would say that no matter what party is in charge, they're going to endorse and back and form a coalition with them. Don't believe me? Well, come back to this video in like 10 years and see which party they're in alliance with. Speaking of alliances, there is one more political party that makes a big use of political alliances to stay afloat, being the Labor Party, or Partido del Trabajo, or PT, Mexico's openly socialist political party, the party of people who thought the Cardenas family was too moderate. PVEM and PT have a lot of very odd parallels. They were both founded around the same time, they mostly focus on electoral alliances, and they represent a tight-knit niche in Mexican politics. The main difference being that PT is more consistent in using this to spread their left-wing message. After losing their first solo candidate, they have consistently endorsed the mainstream left-wing option in the election, leading to it basically being almost as if it were a satellite party, with them very rarely going in opposition to whoever is the mainstream left-wing option. In fact, a state that showed this well was the state of Zacatecas, where a prominent left-wing political family in the area were PRD diehards before leaving to join PT and build them up, before becoming lead figureheads in the formation of MORENA. So despite the fact that this party is probably the least successful of all of the parties in this video, it actually has a lot more staying power than its vote returns would actually indicate. And last, but certainly not least, we have the Citizens Movement, or Movimiento Ciudadano, or MC. Or if you're a Mexican who is watching this video, you may know them as
Movimiento Naranja, el futuro está en tus manos. Movimiento Naranja, Movimiento Ciudadano.
This is a party that has gone through a lot of changes, but also hasn't. The Citizens Movement was founded in 1999 by a group of young left-leaning pre-members who wanted to change the course within Mexican politics in the new millennia. A new course for the country, as they said. Why make a new political party as opposed to joining the PRD, you may ask? Well, they viewed the PRD's brand of leftism as becoming an old guard, as well as not meeting the needs of the next generation, particularly in regards to social issues like feminism. The party also identifies itself as social democratic and broadly center-left, but it's a little bit different from the other parties that you might consider center-left in Mexico. Not explicitly opposing capitalism, but arguing it should be fairer, which in the most recent Mexican presidential election has essentially led to them becoming a third force in Mexico, kind of becoming the de facto center, rather than joining with one coalition and trying to be 100% pro-AMLO, or joining the other coalition and being 100% anti-AMLO. They've decided to work with him issue by issue, particularly on things regarding, again, feminism, or LGBTQ rights, or marijuana, but opposing him on certain other issues, which has led to many people to actually take a look at this party more seriously than the rest of them, as they have made a point to refuse joining an alliance or friendship with the Mexican political elite, leading to the MC to become very prominent in Mexico. Don't count them out quite yet. So yeah, that's basically all I have to say on this topic. Maybe check in the future to see if I have a video on the upcoming Mexican presidential election. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified if a future video of mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, or consider supporting me on Patreon.